Može Bog, Hristos in nas. Good morning, Christ in our midst. Welcome to Church School for this, the sixth Sunday after Pentecost. Dobrodošli na čast crkvene škole za ovu nedjelju, šest nedjelje posle Duha. Se pomolimo Gospodu. U ime Otca i Sina i Svetoga Duha, Oče naš, koji si na nebesima, da se sveti ime Tvoje, da dođe carstvo Tvoje, da bude volja Tvoja na zemlji kao i na nebu. Hljeb naš nasečni daj nam danas i oprosti naše greške i poštamo od grijesima svojim. I navedi nas u iskušenje i izbavi nas od zla. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil one. Slava Otcu i Sinu i Svetom Duhu, i sad i u veku i veku, vekom i Gospodu, Gospode, Isuse Hriste Bože naš, blagoslovi ove učitelje, ove učenike i ovo učenje što će im se predati na Tvoje proslavljenje, na njihovo spasenje i za sve što postoji na njeno izbavljenje. Lord Jesus Christ our God, bless these teachers, these students, and this teaching which shall be imparted unto them for your glorification, for their sanctification, and deliverance of all of creation. Amen.
Good morning and welcome to the continuing series on the lives of the Serbian saints, our summer church school program for this year. In the past weeks, we have been talking about, and we did a little name recognition last week, things that you remember from certain decades. We've been talking about Serbian saints. The last 2 weeks, we talked about Serbian saints who labored in America. They came to America to spread Orthodoxy and within America and to bring people to Orthodoxy in the Americas. We talked of Saint Madodia of Libertyville, who was born in Montenegro, of humble pious parents in 1889, lifted some at a young age to go to further his education at the seminary and join the monastery of Studenica. He became the first Serbian bishop of the newly formed Serbian Orthodox Diocese in America and built our St. Sava's church in Libertyville, Illinois, monastery in Libertyville, Illinois. Last week we talked about St. John of San Francisco, of a different background. Was born of Russian noble parents in 1896, not long after St. Magdodia. So we're talking the same decade, same era. Went to a military school, was forced to flee Russia and go into Serbia when they had the Russian, the Bolshevik and the Russian invasions. He taught at the Serbian seminary. Came to America and labored in San Francisco and brought many people to the faith, not only Russian background, but also many, because at this time there is no established Serbian Orthodox Church in America, and he brought many people over and brought many and baptized and chrismated many into the faith. We began our series looking at the parents of Saint Sava, of royalty of the kingdom of Serbia, of the royal family, and how they abdicated crown and glory and throne and power to become monastics, and had built, even in their times of power and glory, built many churches and monasteries to serve the faithful and the people of their homeland, and joined their son in the monastic vocation, Saint Sava. We're going to do another little name game today. Who was Abraham Lincoln? Everybody, I'm sure, knows, regardless of how, if you were in school for 1 year, you know who Abraham Lincoln was. Let's throw you out another name. Jovan Dalbovic, or Sebastian Dalbovic, or Saint Sebastian Dalbovic. It's so easy to recognize names and events that are brought to us constantly in our daily lives and our secular lives. It is much harder for us to recognize the lives of the saints because that is not what we are indoctrinated with daily. But if we take the few moments to pick up a book and read the lives of the saints, we will see that not only do we need to recognize their names, we need to recognize their behavior, their attitude, their lifestyle, their embracing of what I will talk about at the end of this lesson, their embracing of their participation in the royal priesthood, not only as ordained clergy, but as those that are baptized and chrismated into Christ. We would look at the life of Saint Sebastian of Jackson and San Francisco. Uh, Saint Sebastian was born in America. So now we have a Russian born, we have a Serbian born, and we now have a Serb of Serbian descent born in America in 1863. So he's born about 30 years prior to Saint Magdalena and Saint John Maximovich, but they all labored in the same areas and in the same decade and had contact with each other in their lives. He was born of Serbian immigrant parents who had came to America after leaving their home in Sveti Nikola, whether it was to escape the Ottoman-Montenegrin War or whether it was merely to seek a better life when they heard of the gold rush in America. You figure they settled on the West Coast. So they came through across the Atlantic, came up through the Panama Canal, and headed north into California. It was possible they were seeking the gold rush fortune. We don't know, but they were faithful and they were pious Serbian Orthodox family. They had been blessed with 7 children, of which Jovan was the 4th born. At that time, there was no established Orthodox church on the West Coast. You have the Orthodox churches of the Russian missions in Alaska, in Sitka, but you don't actually have an established Orthodox church on the West Coast in California. So they very much wanting their child to be baptized in the Orthodox faith. They have him baptized by Harriman Kirill on a Russian Navy vessel that was stationed in the harbor outside of San Francisco. The Navy vessel was probably in the area in assistance with the Russians signing over Alaska to from their possession to be an American territory. So they on the Archimandrite Kirill was the Navy chaplain. He was on the boat. So they took young Jovan onto the boat and had him baptized and chrismated in the Orthodox faith there. He grew up in the Orthodox faith, though there was no formal church at that time there. His family was quite faithful, and they attended services. He, even as a young child, attended the services of the Orthodox faith in homes, very humble homes, where they would have visiting Russian clergy come in and do the divine liturgy. He himself remembers and recalls a time when he went through storming rain with his mother to a very, very small house. And there were about 20 other Orthodox faithful there who all partook of Holy Communion at that time. He remembers seeing only 2 icons adorning the house, one of the Theotokos, one of Christ. And the holy table of oblation sitting in the corner. Very meager, very, we come to our grand churches and we think, we see the lives of the saints around us. We're surrounded with the beauty of the church, and that helps us to embrace the faith. You have this very young boy who's coming into a house with really no ornament or nothing that's. No major iconostasis, no icons that were grand, no frescoes, very small church within a home. But he embraces the faith wholeheartedly and has a burning desire in his heart to become closer and closer to God. As he grew, and as the Russian mission in Alaska realized that there are more and more Orthodox settling along the coast in California, they sent a priest down from Sitka, and they began to serve in a home of a local Serb, Peter Sokolovic. He faithfully helped serve throughout his whole growing up in the altar. He helped to. He would eventually. He never missed a service. He would come as he grew older, come on his own to the church, and eventually churches were formed. You had the Church of Saint Basil. You had churches growing up from this Russian mission along the coast of California and San Francisco area. Uh, he faithfully attended and helped on the altar. His desire was to make the Orthodox faith available to all peoples, regardless of their ethnic background, and not just separate the Orthodox, and not just separate the Russians from the Serbs. He just wanted to spread the faith, spread Orthodoxy, and he did so by reaching out to people, by helping people in need. He would give his own possessions. His even as a young child, you could see his humbleness. He didn't desire or covet everything that was available at the time as he was growing up. New inventions or like things were coming out. He would give his clothes off of his back, his excess, to if he saw a family in need. As because the coast was a lot of immigrants, a lot of people coming there for the gold rush and not maybe making a fortune. He would reach out to the needy. He would give food. He would provide food for them. So much like the lives of Saint John Maximovich, as you see him laboring in Japan, you see this young boy years, like 30 years prior, doing the exact same thing on the coast of America. Uh, he grew up in humility, caring for those in need, giving up his personal possessions. After he graduated from high school, he actually graduated from a Russian high school. The Russians brought down their school from Sitka and had the Orthodox children attending that. He graduated from the Russian mission school. He served the church in San Francisco as a reader and a cantor. He desired to follow in the footsteps of his bishop, John, a Russian bishop who wanted to spread Orthodoxy to everybody. He wanted to bring those, even non-Orthodox, people who are falling away from the Orthodox Church, Uniats, all people back to the Orthodox faith. His travels were many. His travels took him up to Alaska to Sitka. It took him to Juneau, where he converted and brought many of the locals into the Orthodox faith. In fact, where they were able to establish their own St. Nicholas Parish, which still exists today in Juneau. Getting the blessing to continue his studies, which he wanted very much to do, he went off to St. Petersburg, Russia, to seminary. So you see the Russian connection there with St. John Maximovich studying in Russia as well as St. Magdalia. In 1888, he was taught a monk, and that is when he changed his name to Sebastian from Johann. Soon he would return to San Francisco, where he would serve as a deacon at St. Basil's Cathedral under Vladika of Vladimir, who very much knew the need to do missionary work in English so the American faithful could understand their faith. So you have, way back in the late 1800s, a bishop who had the insight and the foresight to say that these people need to be worshiping in language they're going to understand. They can't embrace something they don't fully know. That is why it is so important that even as a young child, read books in the languages that you're comfortable in so that you fully understand the faith. This lovely little book of St. Sebastian is available in both languages. It's available in the English and it's also available in a Serbian version. If anybody would like copies of this little book, I'd be glad to order them for you. The book of the Lives of the Saints is a marvelous collection to have and to pick up and read when we're feeling that we're not able to be pious or everything around us is making us unholy. There were many things that these young men could have said, oh, well, we're being influenced, we can't be holy. We can't love God above anything else. He could have opted to go pan for gold and make a fortune, but that's not what he wanted in his life. He desired to be close to God. He desired to bring the faith to people who may not understand the faith. He desired to teach. He desired to love. He desired to be a pastor, be a leader. He tended to the spiritual needs of all Orthodox who are in lumber camps and the gold mine camps, from Alaska all the way through down to San Diego, and even into the United States. there was a little article that was posted by our very own Vodika Internet when he did a writing on Saint Sebastian, how Saint Sebastian traveled humbly, traveled in many different means. He traveled by stagecoach, he traveled by train, he traveled by foot. He reached out to all peoples. He reached out to the lumberjacks, the gold miners. He didn't separate people by their ethnicity. He separated them by their need. If they needed a priest, he was there for them. If they needed teaching and guidance, he was there for them. In 1888, while he was in St. Petersburg, he was taught a monk and then took the name Sebastian. He soon returned to San Francisco, where he would serve as, and where in 1880 became a deacon, and he served at St. Basil's Cathedral under Vladimir. He took many of the services of the Divine Liturgy and took it out of Church Slavonic, and he was the first to make a Divine Liturgy book available in English so that people could understand the Divine Liturgy fully. In 1892, he was ordained a priest, becoming the first American born to be ordained an Orthodox priest. And he was also the first tonsured American-born Orthodox monk. So you have, if you ever read the stories of the Wild West or the stories of the gold mine times, you know there were outside influences. You know there was temptations. You know there were many things that could have persuaded him to go away from the church, away from God. But none of that prevented this young man from dedicating his whole life to God and his whole service to God, for recognizing his role as part of the royal priesthood. Known as the father of Serbian Orthodoxy in America, he founded several Serbian Orthodox churches, including the first Serbian Orthodox Church of St. Sava in Jackson, California, which is still a thriving parish today. If you have a few moments, take the time to go online, Google the Church of St. Sava in Jackson. It is a very beautiful church sitting up on a hill. We had the privilege to actually go and see the church on one of our trips to California. Very noticeable above the town of Jackson, with a cemetery surrounding it. The church is still attended by faithful Serbian families today. He worked very closely. He found us that he worked very closely with St. Alexis Toth when he was sent to Minneapolis to bring many of the Uniates back into the Orthodox faith and to also convert many Episcopalians to Orthodoxy. This is a true example of his Christian witnessing, of using his talents and using his care and his pastoral abilities to bring people to the faith. He established the Serbian Orthodox Parish in Butte, Montana. He worked very closely with Bishop Tikhon in forming the Serbian Orthodox Mission. In 1905, he was named head of the Serbian Orthodox Mission at its newly founded headquarters and newly constructed Holy Resurrection Cathedral in Chicago, which he would lead for the next 5 years. In 1905, Archbishop Tikhon nominated him to the episcopate, to become a bishop. But this would not happen for him because it was not his desire. He desired to continue his extensive missionary work. Also at the time, there was much dissension in the newly establishing Orthodox churches between the Serbian communities and the Russian communities. Here we see where politics and ethnicity and nationality tend to want to pull people apart rather than unite. And Saint Sebastian was a uniter. He wanted the people to be together. We're all one in Christ, in our love for Christ. And there's no reason why we should be separated by ethnicity. And he didn't like this political pulling that was happening at the church and to the newly established Serbian mission. And he asked to be, in 5 years, he asked to be relieved of his duties as the head of the Serbian Orthodox mission. So now it is at this time where you're now starting to have St. Medadia come in and St. Nikola Velimirovic to come in. The people initially wanted, when St. Medadia came in 1919 to the Russian Sobor in Cleveland, Ohio, they wanted him to be the bishop. This was not to be realized as the Serbian Patriarch Kate had another plan. So they then sent St. Nikolai over, who ended up not being the bishop, but ended up being head of this mission with St. Magdalia as his uh, second in command, so to speak. But eventually, St. Magdalia would become the first bishop of the newly established Orthodox diocese in America. So you see how their lives are now all intertwining. Even though there's like a 30-year age difference between St. Sebastian and St. Magdalia, they're all working together from the Serbian homeland to the Americas. And St. Sebastian would travel back and forth many times to Serbia to be in the monasteries, to work with the people in Serbia. He went during World War One as a chaplain back to Serbia. He went during the Balkan Wars in the early 1900s, 1912. He went back to Serbia to serve as a chaplain. He went again after he was relieved of his duties in 1910. He then again when he went the first time in 1912 for the Balkan Wars. He went again in 1917 at the end of World War One. So you have him not just focusing on one aspect of the faith, but focusing on many aspects of the faith. Anywhere where he could be of service to his church or to help his church, he was definitely there to be there to help the faithful, to keep them united with Christ. During the Balkan War, 1912-1913, he served as a chaplain. He then returned to America, where he taught at the new St. Platon Seminary in New Jersey. In 1915, he first met St. Nikola Velimirovich on a trip to San Francisco. As the tensions continued in 1916, both he and St. Nikolai faced many criticisms for saying that they were trying to split up the churches. But St. Sebastian, his only concern was for the needs of the faithful. This was never any intent of his. He tried to remain as much as possible apart from all this political turmoil. With World War I raging in full force, he asked to be released from the Russian diocese and to be able to serve in the Serbian homeland under the Serbian Patriarchate. In 1917, he again traveled to Serbia as a military chaplain, after which he continued his labors between the Americas and Serbia. It was by 1919 that St. Magdalia had been called to the Sorbonne, Cleveland, and St. Nikolai would be ordained to the episcopate. Archimandrite Sebastian had met again with St. Nikolai and then Vladika Nikolai in New York in 1921. It was after much debate that St. Sebastian would be a candidate for the bishopric here. But that was not to be, as I said, from his own desire of wanting to continue the strong missionary work. He knew the Serbian people needed somebody to guide them and to unite them in the faith, not just be an administrative leader or bishop. And he knew that he would be as much more service, establishing churches, ordaining priests. He's seen the need for Serbian priests to speak the Serbian language to the people as the communities grew and grew and grew. So he ordained many of the seminarians that he had at the St. Platon Seminary in New Jersey into the priesthood. His travels continued on. St. Magdalia would become the first bishop of the newly formed Serbian American diocese. His travels continued, taking him into Japan. He continued with 15 mission trips across the country from Serbia to America until he finally retired. He was living at the time in a humble apartment in Serbia. In 1938, he retired to Žiča Monastery. He reposed at Žiča in 1930 as his health was quickly declining due to a bad heart. He was buried by St. Nikolai at Žiča. In the published writings by Vladika, who spoke of his mission work, St. Sebastian was without any outside funding, without any organizational support. He carried the gospel of peace from country to country, concentrating most of his work in the Americas by means of every form of transportation, from stagecoach to railroad to foot. His worldly missions took him to the Aleutian Islands, to Russia, onward to small Balkan towns. He ministered to miners, to lumberjacks. He never asked for their ethnic background or national jurisdiction. He offered his services for free to all those in need, brought many others into orthodoxy, ordained many clergy. He denied himself to care for others. He baptized more faithful into orthodoxy than any other Serbian priest. With the blessing of the Bishop of Žiča, September of 2007, and Bishop Muxon, who is the current bishop of the Western Diocese, his relics were brought back to his home spot, his birthplace of California, and his relics were brought to his first church that he established, the first Serbian Orthodox Church in America, in Jackson, where his relics still rest. His tombstone, as Žiča so adequately read, the first American Serbian apostle. Take some time to look at the places where Saint Sebastian labored. Many of them are the same as Saint Mudania and Saint John Maximovich. Take time to look up the first Serbian parish in America, the Serbian parish in Jackson. So when we're looking at the lives of the saints, we need to reflect on what does this have to do with us. We see that the saints came from many different backgrounds and lifestyles, just as we are from many different lifestyles. This is to say that richness in itself is not a sin. We have saints who were quite wealthy, as Saint Anastasia and Saint Simeon, Saint Sava's parents. We have Saint Maximovich, who was quite wealthy. And poverty in itself is not a virtue, but it is our nature, our being, our mindset, our priorities in life that bring us salvation. Many of the Old Testament were wealthy. Abraham was wealthy, as was Job. But it is their ability to overcome the passions, to have the virtues shine forth, that made them such pious leaders of the people and saints of our church. It is our passions that become our hindrance. In the life of Saint Sebastian, we look at the era he lived in, where there was the Wild West, where he could have fallen into that realm. But he put his salvation, the salvation of the people around him above all. He put behind him the ridicule, the politics. He separated himself as much as possible from the turmoil. He did not let the turmoil impact his work to steadily profess the faith. In the gospel reading, it's easier for the camel to pass the avenue than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Not that the rich man cannot, but he must first prioritize his life to seek the kingdom of God, not solely the riches of the world, and to use the riches of the world that you have been so blessed by God in a way of gratitude and service to God. The lives of the saints show us that striving for the heavenly over the earthly will always bring us closer to God. So we are people with a purpose. We see these young men who devote their lives at a very young age to following Christ. You are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people, in order that you may proclaim the mighty acts of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you have not received mercy, but you have now received mercy. So we are looking at, that is from Peter, the epistle of the first book of Peter to chapter 2:9. In the Holy Mystery of Chrismation, we were sealed and become members as God's people, a people with a purpose. We are called to be part of his royal priesthood, not just the ordained clergy, to proclaim his mighty acts of redemption and creation. We, as Christians, must fully apply ourselves in acting as his people. So become doers, become active Orthodox children, become active Orthodox Christians. Look ways where you can serve God with gratitude and always humbly and piously serve the Lord. And look at the saints, and look at the American Serbian saints who have labored to establish to give us what we have today, the Serbian Orthodox Church of America. And know that we too can strive to be holy as God is holy. That will be, we will be doing activities for those children who will be in attendance. You did receive the line drawing outline and the color. You could do that as a shrinky. I have shrinky paper here to use as a light caster, or if we have a couple volunteers to try to do the icon of St. Magdalena by doing the icon techniques that we used in the past, where you trace the line drawing and then begin to paint the icon. We have the projects ready available here for children who will be in attendance. That will be the end of the series for today. There will be no Serbian Saint series next week, but it will resume the following Sunday with the life of Saint Nikola Velimirovic, Saint Nikolai of Žiča. I'll wants to lead us in the closing prayer.
Dostojno istino blažno su Tebe, Bogorodicu, uvijek blažno sve te spekovne Mate Boga našega, časne Hervim, neporedivo slavnja Serafima, ti što Bogoreč, neporočno, Bogorodicu, mi te patičamo, truly me to bless thee, Theotokos, ever blessed, most pure, the Mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim, and beyond compare, more glorious than the seraphim, thou whom purity is given birth to God, the word, the very Theotokos, divine. I zahvaljujemo ti, stvoritelju, što si nas udostojio svoje milosti, te smo pažljivo slušali i nauku koju nam se predaje, spasi, pomiluj starešine naše roditelji i učitelje koji nas vode da poznamo istinu, a nama daruj snagu i moć da možemo produžiti korisno učenje. We thank you, O Creator, that thou hast vouchsafed us thy grace in giving heed to learning. Bless our masters, parents, teachers who bring us to a knowledge of truth, and grant us the strength and firmness to preserve in this study. God is with us, whose grace and bounty for mankind, always now and ever into age stage. Amen. S nama je Bog, sa milošću i blagoslov i uvek, uvek, uvek. Amen.